what about Tyrese Maxey? We've heard it before, but again, just going off the Maxey Museum part of it, and then everything that he said and being clear about it, and certainly championships, also had a pretty good press conference.
I thought the way Kyle approached it with what he wrote was right, because it was really kind of amazing. The Sixers brought in Paul George, and Devon and I were talking about this, possibly the most consequential free agency signing in the last 50 years. And that's including that Moses was technically a trade. Doesn't matter. Right. The point is, it was a really,
most of their biggest moves have been trades, frankly.
The point is, it was a really, really, really big move. And Tyrese Maxey, in the most humble way possible, upstaged it. And I think the major key was, there were two keys, first of all. The confidence and belief and faith he showed in the front office made this possible. It's been talked about. It's been written about. It's absolutely true. Tyrese Maxey's development into who he is and the fact they were able to get him with that 21st pick makes the second half of Joel Embiid's prime possible. And also, it just dawned, like, it really just made, remember how much last year we were talking about, like, oh man, Daryl Morey was called a liar. Daryl Morey went back on his word. Daryl Morey will never be able to get the guy he wants again. And here we are, a year later, Tyrese Maxey delayed a huge payday, not a small payday, a monster payday, a full year based on Daryl Morey and his word. Paul George, and that was a guy who was talking directly to James Harden and really looked at James Harden as like a mentor. And then Daryl Morey ends up signing a guy with that cap space, a guy who was talking directly to James Harden. Yeah. And it's just all these things that we freak out about and build these narratives about. A lot of times it doesn't really matter because trust is a very personal thing. And for Tyrese Maxey, he had trust, A, because he had worked with him for a couple of years, and B, because the Sixers took a shot on him, which is something that Joel Embiid has talked about time and time again. Like, I believe in this front office. I believe in this organization because they believed in me. Tyrese feels the same way. And with Paul George, it's just, all right, it's a guaranteed money, so it doesn't, trust doesn't really matter all that much. But it was just, it's funny to think about the fact that this move that was supposed to tank Daryl Morey's career because nobody would trust him, ended up having two players trust him, and it worked out in such a big way.
And Tyrese, I think, was asked about it pretty directly during the press conference and said, I think that's just an individual thing, right? You have to, what happens with James is not necessarily what happens with me, is what happens with Paul or Joel or anybody else. And I think he was pretty clear-eyed about it. I mean, frankly, if Tyrese or Rich Paul at any point last season felt like they had reason to doubt Daryl, I can guarantee you there would have been some noise made about that. That might not be Tyrese's MO, but if Daryl sat down with Rich Paul and Tyrese and told them, we're going to take care of this kid, and then you got to, let's say, March, and you start to have those little, things have changed. Rich Paul is not taking that one sitting down. And I think one of the major things coming out of this is that Rich has been complimentary of how the organization has treated Tyrese throughout this process, right?
Even being included in that museum.
In that Sixers museum. Now, I don't know if Rich Paul gave the sign off, put me in the video.
No, I just
but I think
the point
being there and saying
what he said,
even if it hadn't gotten in the video, the fact that we wouldn't know about it, but the fact that that's said at all is an important sign of where that relationship's at. But by the way, I would even go past the Paul George and the Maxey examples. Go to someone like Caleb Martin.
That's
right?
The one
Caleb Martin is a guy who by all reports, seemed to have turned down more money, but him and his agent came to the Sixers, and the Sixers were like, yes, we would love to have you. We'll give you this cap space that we have immediately. And really, it's a lesson on, if you have something to offer these players, they will turn around very quickly and say, great. If you have something that is unique, where in Caleb's case, they could give him basically what he could have gotten any other place, but also the chance to continue to compete, right? Play on a team that has a chance to get deep into the playoffs. He could have gotten similar money from the Detroits, the San Antonios, these other cap space teams around the league, or one of the teams that maybe wants to use an exception on him. Daryl Morey went to him and said, here's what we have. And anything that happened with James Harden had no real impact on him. These guys, and for good reason, I'm not saying this as a diss to them. These guys have to look out for themselves. They can't be worried about why James Harden was mad at Daryl Morey 10 months ago or whatever. It's what is best for the bottom line on my deal they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And he talked about, Maxey talked about in the press conference when he mentioned everybody's situation is different, but speaking openly with and trusting, talking to his parents, talking to Rich Paul and talking to Joel Embiid about all of that. And the thing with the Rich Paul piece for me was going back to the Ben Simmons part, how contentious that was. Was that going to impact anything? Because we talked about it at the time. And
Tyrese
Maxey
was a big time agent.
Player,
it's like you're not someone you're going to have to deal with a lot in the years
and you
to
have
come.
one of his clients who's a young up and coming player, didn't know he might make the All-Star status, but he might get there. And how is that going to work? How is that going to play out? But again, that's a different situation and a different spot. And then the other part is this too. Tyrese Maxey just a different cat. He probably was sitting there saying, all right, I'll do it, even though it was tough to watch his classmate of Anthony Edwards get his extension. And I can't remember the other ones that did, but I remember Anthony Edwards getting his. And I'm like, damn, Tyrese is not going to do this. You might risk injury here in the season. You don't want to wish that on anybody. But when you think about getting locked in like that on a big number, you want some security. You want to get that done. I don't know how I feel about this one, but he got through it healthy, even though he did get injured. And he made it through, made the All-Star team, all of that, and he capitalized off of it to become who he's become, face of the franchise, and them going and doing that Maxey Museum, which, by the way, he had, from my understanding, he had no idea about it. He was totally surprised. And everything that he said in that press conference about why are we going up to Philadelphia for it, he did not know anything about it and was genuinely surprised of how everything played out. So, I mean, the guy is just... We were saying it. He's just a different dude that even though you don't root for the team in general, you just have to do your job. He's a guy that you can root for and just be happy for.
I guess two other things. First of all, it looks like got a little swole, which is great. A little bit of muscle added to Tyrese would be good.
Why didn't I see it that way when we were sitting there? I'm like, I know he got bigger, but the way it looked on those photos, he was swole. And I'm like, damn.
He's like shoulders back.
Exactly, right. You playing for the Eagles as linebacker or something? What's going on?
The other thing is I heard you guys like talking about the whole like Maxey, Iverson kind of thing. And look, Iverson was a cultural phenomenon that's going to be hard to replicate. But in terms of like approval rating, Maxey might end up with the highest approval rating of any star in maybe in recent Sixers history.
At least he has it right now, for sure.
Yeah, because like first of all, the weight of expectations aren't on his shoulders, and it's just impossible not to root for him. And when you're improving every year, you're a tremendous worker, a great guy, a great teammate, and the weight of expectations are falling on your teammate. Like he has a near 100% approval rating.
That's true.
He might have the highest approval rating in Philadelphia right now. I'm not even sure if it would be all that close. So I think that it's just you can see why it's impossible not to believe in the kid.
It really is.
We all silly like the mayor.